We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live. Boxingego unpack. Yeah. We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live. Wow. So the WBC says it's unfair to label Canelo a cheat with the drugs or a drug cheat. We're going to talk about that in this particular video. Keep it locked. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Make sure you smash the like button. Also, subscribe to the channel for the latest and greatest in boxing. Let's jump right into it. Fred has a video where he interviewed Mauricio Sulaiman. I will put the link in the description. And they had an interesting dialogue. He was asked, Mauricio Sulaiman, I'm just going to paraphrase, but the link's in the description in case you want to watch the video in its entirety, verbatim, and hear exactly what was said. But the host, Fred, he basically asked the WBC why he had him on the horn, had him on the line. He says, you've invested a lot of money into the clean boxing program. What went into your decision and basically allowing Canelo to fight for your belt in his very next fight after failing a drug test? Now, you can see Mauricio Sulaiman was trying to be diplomatic, and, you know, he immediately kept saying, just if you do your research, you'll find out that in certain countries, Mexico, China, and other countries, this has been a problem with clenbuterol. Then he goes on to say things about like a soccer team. He said there are almost 200 players and 119 of them tested positive, yada, 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 right? And in closing, he says, do your research. Canelo had a low level of clenbuterol in his system, which was ingested. He's, you know, saying that the Canelo's excuse is plausible. He had a small amount and they now changed the protocol and the amount, the threshold, things like that. Now, I'm gonna say full disclosure, I don't know if Canelo intentionally ingested clenbuterol or took clenbuterol or not. So this video is not even about that. But however, even if Mauricio Sulaiman is going to say that it's plausible that Canelo didn't cheat, then guess what? That means it's plausible that he did intentionally cheat as well, right? The funny thing with boxing is you have fans, you have organizations like the WBC, etc., and they play favorites, and it's also obvious. So once again, my question to you, let's get it live and direct. West Side, baby. If it's plausible that Canelo didn't cheat and the tainted beef excuse, you know, based on history and other sports teams and whatever else excuse that you're going to use, then how could you only look at one end of the spectrum and say, you know what, that's exactly what it is? Is Mauricio Sulaiman in camp with Canelo and his team every day? I don't think so, right? So you see this, especially from the WBC recently. When it came to Deontay Wilder, the claims of Glovegate 1 and 2 with Tyson Fury, Mauricio Sulaiman was quick to dismiss those rumors. He even said to Sky Sports, if you believe that rubbish, then you're stupid. It's ridiculous, and it's a way to denigrate or hate on Tyson Fury's accomplishment and one of the greatest wins in the last century, I believe is what he said. So my thing is this for Mauricio Sulaiman, because he keeps saying, oh, if you do your research, this, that, and the third. So if you do your research, there have been athletes who have also cheated because they want to cheat, because they're jockeying for a position and it gives them a competitive edge. So my thing is this, I don't know if Canelo did or didn't intentionally ingest it, but we do know Canelo's team, one of his team members, Chepo Reynoso, is a butcher. We do know Canelo has a lot of money. So my thing is this, why is Canelo, as he's training for a fight, why would he be in Mexico, which is that, you know, that's fine to be in Mexico, but why would he not be getting the best grade A beef that he could find, or, you know, having a personal chef that meal preps, things like that. Because again, we don't know what happened in that situation. It's all speculative, and people are going to feel one way or another. Everybody got a reason or excuse. And it reminds me, I had a teacher back in the day, and they asked me, they said, "Hey, Ego, what's the difference between a reason and excuse?" And I want you guys to think about that. What's the difference between a reason and an excuse? There really isn't any. There's really not a difference between the reason you give and an excuse. Either something happened or it didn't happen. You know, if you didn't turn in your 7-page paper by the due date, that's the reality. You did not complete the assignment within the allotted time. You know, you could say, "Oh, my dog ate my homework," or "My computer crashed," or this and that. But there's not really much difference between a reason and an excuse. So using the Canelo situation, he has his reason that he's given to the public, but there's also people who are outright trying to cheat. So there's so many loopholes in Mauricio Suleiman's argument, and you could bring up all the other alternative sports and soccer teams and baseball players. We're not talking about that because all of those are team sports, right? So if you're trying to compare apples and apples, a team sport is different because the size of your test subject would be, this bus had 100 people on it and 79 of them tested positive. But since boxing is not a team sport, Canelo is the only person being tested, and he's the only person who failed the drug test, right? That's the reality. Versus if you had a bus full of 100 people and 70% of the team had this, then okay, it's easy to infer that this bus full of 100 people all weren't illegally cheating and doing PEDs or clenbuterol. You know, that wouldn't be likely. So in boxing, like I said, the test subject is one man, Canelo Alvarez. He's the only person that failed. To my knowledge, they don't test the trainers, Eddie Reynoso, Chepo, and, you know, the water boy or sparring partner. They're not testing all that. So that's one flaw in Mauricio Suleiman's argument. You can't compare this to a team sport because boxing, you may have a team, but in that square circle is really you and the opponent. Your coach can't help you throw punches. Your coach can't be in the ring and, you know, trip up the other guy or jab the other guy with you. He can only instruct from the outside. So that's a whole different situation because, again, if there's a bus with 100 people on it and 70% or 70 people on the bus all have this sickness, you could say, okay, it's food poisoning. Okay, the clenbuterol must be ingested, but that's not the case with Canelo. So horrible example. Another loophole is this. When it comes to the Canelo Alvarez thing, the bottom line is it doesn't matter what WADA or USADA, he said something to the effect of Canelo failed a drug test and the threshold has been changed. But none of that matters because at the point in which the infraction occurred, the rules weren't changed. So you still have defaulted and that's on your record. You know, so what Mauricio Suleiman said was neither here nor there by saying, hey, the amount and the threshold has changed. So, for example, hypothetically, I live in the state of California. So if the CHP pulled me over and I tested, or they did the sobriety test, and I was over the BAC, blood alcohol concentration level, that was currently instated, and they would take me to jail, put me in a holding cell, and then I would have to face all the court-related DUI protocols, maybe not be able to drive unless it's to or from work, things like that, right? If later this summer they changed the rules and said, hey, you could have more alcohol in your system and get behind the wheel, but I failed a drug test last year, or I failed the sobriety test last year, that don't have nothing to do with my case because it's the point in which the infraction occurred. That's when you failed. The rule wasn't that. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I mean, you could do this. I could do this all day. If you have a job and you're required to punch in and there's no grace period, and at the time there's no grace period, you're scheduled to be there at 7 and you get there at 7:08. You're late. You're not punctual. So if they later change that and offer a 10-minute grace period, at the time there was no grace period in play. So that doesn't change. You got written up for being late because there was no grace period at the point. So Mauricio Sulaiman, a lot of what he was saying to defend Canelo, it really wasn't a defense. Again, you could say it's plausible, but then that means cheating is also plausible. How is it only plausible that Canelo's telling the truth? Or any athlete for that matter? Just the excuse or reason that I gave has to be the true reason. You know what I'm saying? Come on, man. So the WBC continues to show their bias. They probably shouldn't even speak. Canelo, he's already moved on with his career. He's making big bucks. You probably shouldn't speak on this more than you need to, because in the end, it'll show your bias, because you don't really know what another athlete is putting into his or her body. Point blank, period. I know people personally that have lived next to murderers, or people who, you know, I don't want to say the word on my channel, but people who have done the Me Too thing, you know, and to them, that was just a coworker. That was just a neighbor. They didn't know the person's deep, dark secrets, or if somebody was a Chester or whatever. You know, you don't know what people do in their personal lives unless you know them like that and you're around them all the time. You know, I watch a lot of crime shows. Look at the BTK killer. He was a pillar in the community. He had worked with the Boy Scouts, bind, torture, kidnap. That dude. Dennis Rader. Look it up. So a lot of people didn't know that he was a serial killer, but they were interacting with him daily. So for Mauricio Sulaiman to act like because he knows Canelo or he believes Canelo, you automatically know what's good and what he's putting in his body, I mean, that's faulty. Like I said, it's plausible on the meat scenario, but it's also plausible that that wasn't the case as well. And another reason why my channel has been so successful over the years is because we just apply simple logic. Last thing I want to talk about that Mauricio Sulaiman said that is definitely a loophole that doesn't make sense is he says the threshold that Canelo had in his system, you know, again, had he failed today, it wouldn't have been an actual failure. That's because the rules have been changed. But that doesn't make the case that he's innocent either. And I want to talk about that briefly as well, because first of all, he failed when he failed. He failed at whatever year that was, 2018 or whatever. So the rules in place deemed it was a failure. So he has that on his jacket. People, you can't erase it because the rules are now changed, right? That's one thing. You know, like look at if we're looking at combat sports, look at Nick Diaz. Nick Diaz have failed for marijuana and he sat out for years. They like banned him for years, but now, if I'm not mistaken, they're changing the rules where marijuana is, since it's the you know, you got cannabis clubs and dispensaries and things like that. Now they're deeming marijuana as non-threatening, or it won't cause you to fail a drug test. But he was already persecuted for it. So you have to understand timelines here. But the last thing that I really wanted to get to when it comes to this whole Canelo situation is he's saying the amount was so small. But let's be real. And again, I don't know what Canelo did, and I'm going to stress that. But I'm just talking about the straw man argument that Sulaiman is making in attempt to defend Canelo, right? The bottom line is, when you're trying to take PEDs, you don't want to get caught, because if you didn't care about getting caught, you would do it out in the open, or you would declare it, or you do interviews and say, hey, like, when's the last time you seen a boxer and he said, yeah, I'm on TRT or meldonium, or I'm on ostarine. Nobody says it. Nobody's that upfront and outright. That's why you have to get those through, you know, black market dealers and in the underworld of peddling roids and PEDs and stuff. It's not something you could just go to Walgreens and get. So the point I'm gonna make is very simple. When Canelo failed the drug test, even if he had a marginal, tiny trace elements amount of clenbuterol in his system, you have to understand, if he was trying to cheat, he's trying to probably also hide it and flush it out of his system. Therefore, that would explain why athletes will fail one test, but the test before and the test after, you know, they may have passed, but they failed this one. Like, so Canelo failed February 17th and February 20th, but he did tests after that where they couldn't find the clenbuterol in his system and before. So you have to understand, and I've studied this extensively, when you're talking about anabolics and clenbuterols and ostarine and stanozolol and these different hardcore dianabols and things like that, these roids and PEDs, EPO, the goal is to not get caught. So the athlete is readily trying to flush it out of their system, which would leave lingering trace amounts if at all it is detected. So the amount that Canelo had in his system that alerted the test, that just because it's a small amount, that could be because that's the only remnants and trace of that particular substance in his body after you try to flush it. Does that make sense? So, for example, there's this place out here, it's a smoke shop, and in California, weed wasn't legal like back in the day. So I know people who are doing drug tests and they smoke weed every day. So they would go to this little smoke shop and they had this little formula, and before your drug test, you're supposed to drink it. It's supposed to wash it out of your system, right? Period. So they're trying to cleanse their system and flush it out. When we're talking about boxers and athletes and PEDs, oftentimes they'll use masking agents or diuretics to flush it out of their system. Drink lots of water, certain diuretics that make you pee, so you get that out of your system. So it's like, okay, it's not going to be remaining in your bloodstream forever. So again, Mauricio Suleiman, his whole argument is not satisfactory. Him focusing on the small trace element amount of clenbuterol in Canelo's system, that doesn't exonerate him. That doesn't exonerate him and say, hey, absolutely, positively, he wasn't trying to ingest this. This was tainted meat because it was such a small amount. Because guess what? There's other people who have small amounts because they flush the rest out of their system, and there's only lingering amounts in their bloodstream, if that makes sense. Let me know what you guys think. Link in the description. As always, hate, comment, and subscribe. Till next video is Ego signing off. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more sports. Get unlimited access to premium content with an ESPN Plus subscription. ESPN Plus offers a variety of content, including specials, behind the scenes, docuseries like Bruce Lee's Be Water, and much more. With an ESPN Plus subscription, you get access to a ton of classic archive fights and replays from boxing and the UFC. Big names like, hi, I'm Mike Tyson, come and watch my fight. Floyd Mayweather, easy work, I'm rich. And Manny Pacquiao, yes, it's up to my promoter, just to name a few. If that's not enough, you could get the ESPN bundle, which includes ESPN Plus, Hulu, and Disney Plus. All three apps, one low price. You don't want to miss out. Make sure you guys click that link in the description box of all of my videos. Ego signing off. So if you enjoyed this video and want more content like this on the channel, you can show your appreciation by going to the PayPal donate button or the YouTube support button, and you can donate any amount that you feel is equivalent to the value of this video. Much more to come. Thank you guys for your support. Boxing Ego, the future of boxing.